What is devotion or bhakti? Welcome everybody to another chapter of exploration into the teachings of Prabhuji through the book Experimenting with the Truth. And in this chapter we are going to look at the topic of devotion as it is expressed in the article that answers this question. What is devotion or bhakti? And Prabhuji in this article invites us with his words to a realm that for sure is beyond the logic, the understanding. This is something that we say often in regard to Prabhuji's message, beyond the practical, beyond what is perceptual by the senses, naturally, as we would expect when dealing with topics such as devotion, which of course belongs to the domain of the heart. In the previous chapter, we spoke about the religious phenomenon that Prabhuji reflects on both of its aspects, the institutionalized religion and the authentic religion. And just a little side note, in the recent works of Prabhuji, he will break down the religious phenomenon to three categories. We're not going to delve into it at this point, but I just wanted to mention it. But in this book and in our course, we spoke about two aspects. Again, the authentic religion, which sprang in the hearts of individuals, as we hear from Prabhuji, such as Moses, such as Jesus, such as Muhammad, such as Lao Tse, Shankaracharya, Buddha, etc. And the institutionalized religion that was created by minds, by us, by people, by the mass, generation after generation, interestingly, in an attempt to penetrate into the authentic religion, but without success. The institutionalized religion remained not touching the authentic religion, not able to access the authentic religion. And in this chapter, again, we are dealing with devotion, which is a fundamental aspect of the authentic religion. So it's a good transition from the chapter about religion. We are moving to the chapter about devotion. And in this article that we will read, Prabhuji shares with us about this state. As we will see in this article, in the scriptural quotes that Prabhuji refers to, this topic of devotion exists in all the religions. What also we find in this article is poetic descriptions by Prabhuji that have no religious reference, or at least not any reference to any familiar world religion or to our common understanding of the world religion. And in these poetic descriptions, I think that what we see is that this state of devotion not only exists in all religions, but it's also existing in each and every individual, regardless of any religious or non-religious affiliation. So again, Prabhuji shares descriptions when he explains the state of devotion, when he answers this question, what is devotion or bhakti? And in these descriptions, he offers imagery. And he inspires us, he connects us to the state of devotion within ourselves, and he shows us that all of us know what is devotion. That this phenomenon of devotion does not only belong to religions, but it's within the spectrum of us as human beings. And in this, he, in fact, in my eyes, what he does beautifully in this article, he bridges between the religions and each and every one of us, every human being. We might have had these two aspects stored in completely different departments of our minds. One aspect, maybe we had the department of religions, scriptures, spiritual disciplines, etc. And in a completely different department in our mind, we had quiet, inspiration, wonder. And Prabhuji shows us, in fact, they are one and the same. It's not a different phenomena. But we speak about devotion. This is one phenomenon. And even though devotion is such a subtle matter, that, as we said, it's not a matter of understanding, and this is why it's not easy to communicate it in words. I think that through this article, we are able to recognize this state and therefore penetrate into the meaning of devotion through the words of Prabhuji. I think that through this connection, again, between the religions and these intimate moments between us and ourselves, of quiet, of wonder, again, of inspiration, we can feel suddenly close to Arjuna. We hear about Arjuna in Krishna, the Bhagavad Gita, Hinduism. Suddenly we can feel close to Arjuna. Suddenly we can feel close to the disciples of Buddha, either the Sangha, Kashyapa, Ananda, or the 5 bhikkhus who just gathered around him right after he experienced awakening. Closer to the disciples of Jesus, closer to the people of Israel who went into the desert after Moses. All these individuals did not seek books, religions, did not seek institutions, did not seek a list of actions of what to do and of what not to do. They were captivated by devotional hearts of the realized masters. For example, in this article, Prabhuji tells us, you hear it. He speaks about devotion. He answers to this question, what is devotion? And he tells us, you hear it in the rustle of the wind, the sound of the waves, the rumble of river rapids. You feel it, etc. Soon we are going to read these words. And in these descriptions, Prabhuji does not tell us, I hear it. I will explain to you. But he connects us to this state within ourselves. He tells us, you know what is devotion. You hear it. You recognize it. You just need to recognize, to remember, to identify. And therefore, I think that he teaches us that religions are not about worrying and working and judging and succeeding and failing and achieving. It's about enjoying. It's about living, experiencing ourselves, the divine, life. And again, we see this tie to the topic of religion that we spoke about in the previous chapter in its utmost purity or beauty, which is this aspect of devotion. When we presented this course, we broke down all the chapters and we mentioned the fact that in this chapter of devotion, we will find a devotional testimony. And for me, if I need to summarize this article, I think more than anything else is a devotional testimony. This is what we're getting here. I think that in general, when we contemplate on the message of Prabhuji, the entire message, all the books, all the lectures, everything that Prabhuji tells us, we can recognize 3 aspects or 3 levels. One is knowledge, another one is intellectual contemplation, and a third one is descriptions or testimonies. Now, what I am doing now is analyzing Prabhuji's message, and for this analysis, I'm using tools that I received from Prabhuji in its message that we're going to mention soon, these tools. But before we mention, I would like to remind that this course is not necessarily Prabhuji's exact view. We are dealing with Prabhuji's words. We're speaking about Prabhuji's words in the books, in the lectures, primarily in this course, of course, on the book Experimenting with the Truth. But the presentation, the understanding, the contemplation is naturally my own that gives this course, and therefore it's not necessarily always the way Prabhuji would describe it or would see it. But it is my own process, and of course I welcome whoever listens to go through this process together with me. So when I personally look at Prabhuji's message, I think that we see 3 aspects that is very beneficial for us to isolate and to recognize what they are, to make a distinction: knowledge, intellectual contemplation, and descriptions or testimonies. Now we said we're using tools that we see from Prabhuji for this analysis, and the tools that I'm referring to, one tool is the distinction between knowledge and wisdom. We can, in Hinduism, we can call it jnana and vijnana. This is something that we find in a few locations in Prabhuji's message, when he makes this distinction between knowledge, that we understand as information, external knowledge that is coming to us, that we can just repeat it, and wisdom. What is wisdom is a big topic, but in this context of this distinction that we're referring to, knowledge and wisdom, we mean wisdom, it's not knowledge, it's beyond knowledge. The second distinction, the second tool that we're using in order to analyze or to contemplate on Prabhuji's teachings, is the distinction between our experiences, direct experiences, and experiences of other individuals. And in this principle, we can include direct experience of divine revelation versus words, but we can include any other level of experience, because the important principle that we learn from Prabhuji and that I would like us to focus on is the difference between something that we ourselves can testify, we heard, we touched the fire, we drank the juice, we can testify directly, and experience that we heard from others. We heard that this juice is very tasty, we can repeat it and recommend to others, but we did not taste it ourselves. It's different. And the third distinction that is made in Prabhuji's message is the distinction between the mind and divine revelation. What is coming from the mental level of us human beings, from this body-mind complex that we can think as personas, and divine revelation. Divine revelation is something that of course we find in the Eastern philosophy in abundance, and we also find it in Western philosophy. We learn about it from recent works of Prabhuji that we are not dealing in them at this point, but Prabhuji will speak about the donation, that is a gift, that is something that is received, that is given to us, and it's not related to the time, to the place, to the person, to our characteristics, to our intellectual abilities, but it's a gift. So in this context, we speak about the distinction between mental, the mind, and divine revelation. So these 3 distinctions, of course, are also related to one another, but on purpose we made them as 3 different distinctions, because each and every one of them conveys a specific aspect that is significant for us to understand when dealing with any type of knowledge, of information, of exploration. It's good to make these distinctions. Again, the first distinction is between knowledge and wisdom. The second is between our experiences and experience of others. And the distinction between the mind, the human mind, and divine revelation, that is something that is transcendental to the human mind, that can be revealed to us as human beings. So we said, my conclusion is that we see 3 different types of information: knowledge, intellectual contemplation, and descriptions or testimonies, and it is important for us to recognize the 3, identify and understand the place of each and every one of them. Knowledge, of course, we refer to facts, information, pieces of information that we can hear, retain, repeat. They do not require any intellectual effort. We would call this, in Raja Yoga terms, it's information that it's sitting in the chitta, in this aspect of the memory, this warehouse of information that, again, doesn't require any contemplation. We don't need to understand it. We don't need to compare, infer. It's just there. And it's existing in abundance in Prabhuji's teachings. We receive a lot of knowledge. But this knowledge, again, is just information that can support our journey and our exploration, but it doesn't require any understanding. Just for example, we know that Jesus was born in Bethlehem. Okay, knowledge. We know that Moses was the son of Yocheved and Amram. We know, similarly, this is knowledge, that Shankaracharya said that only Brahman is, and the world is mithya, illusion. We heard it. We can understand or not understand, but unrelated to it, we know it. It's a fact. We know that we heard that Buddha sat under the tree and experienced awakening. It's knowledge. We can repeat it. I heard it. I can tell it to you. I didn't need to understand it or to accept it or to reject it. It's just knowledge. And in Prabhuji's message, we find an abundance of knowledge. A lot of knowledge. So the fact that Prabhuji makes this distinction between knowledge and wisdom does not mean that he rejects knowledge. For sure. The second level of information is the intellectual contemplation. That if we go back to the Raja Yoga terms, we would call this is the part that is under the function of the buddhi. It's our human ability to think. It's still in the mind. We don't speak about divine revelation. It's not a gift. We can make an effort, but it's not knowledge. It's not just to know and memorize and repeat, but we can make some effort with this faculty of thinking that we have as human beings to infer, to conclude, to understand, to generate ideas, to refine and refine and refine our thinking. And this is something that is recommended to us. I think for sure in Prabhuji's message, or if we follow Prabhuji's inspiration, we will want to refine this intellectual faculty, and it's recommended to us in Jnana Yoga path to use the intellectual faculty to the maximum. Even though we cannot, Prabhuji explains it regarding Jnana Yoga, even though we cannot force the jump from our human thinking to meditation, what we can still do, and this is the path of Jnana Yoga, is to improve our thinking to the best of our ability. And then the jump can occur. We create favorable conditions for the transcendence to occur because our mind will be more and more sharp, subtle, pure. Our thinking will be more and more objective, honest, pure, clear. We'll gain more and more clarity through the thinking. And for this, intellectual contemplation helps us. It supports us. And again, we find in the contents of the retroprogressive path a lot of intellectual contemplation, so not just knowledge, but a lot of thinking, exploration. I think that in many places we find Prabhuji's thinking conveyed through the lips of other great individuals, that Prabhuji doesn't always attribute specific ideas to himself. He is not busy with attributing to himself not brilliant ideas and not spiritual experiences. He deals with the truth. He helps us he shares with us his exploration of truth and invites us to enjoy together and to benefit for our journey. But if we are knowledgeable, either in regard to Eastern philosophy or Western philosophy, many times we can recognize this is not Buddha's words, this is Prabhuji's view. This is not Heidegger's idea, this is Prabhuji now, Kierkegaard, Shankaracharya, etc. So we find a lot of intellectual contemplation. And now we get into the third and, I believe, without a doubt, the most important aspect of this message, which is the descriptions or the testimonies. And I think that this aspect, not only it's the heart of this message, but it's also what gives the importance to the knowledge and to the intellectual contemplation and to the context to the knowledge and to the intellectual contemplation. Ultimately, Prabhuji's message in its entirety is a testimony, is a description. He speaks to us through different languages, through different individuals, different religions, different paths, but everything is based on his own experience, direct experience, and always invite us to our individual experience, to our individual journey. But the heart, I think, is the descriptions or the testimonies. In the Bhagavad Gita, it's a verse that we quote many times in this course. Probably this will not be the last time. In 434, Krishna tells Arjuna, if you want to know about the truth, if you want to tap into the truth, look for individuals who can testify about it, who sees it, who speaks from their knowledge. They don't just repeat what they have heard, but they can directly testify. This will be the ultimate way, the favorable conditions for you to tap into the truth. And we spoke about it in the context of the master-disciple relationship, that even though masters typically will not tell us, listen to me, I have the truth, come to me, this is more typical of preachers. And similarly, in Krishna's words, we do not see that he tells Arjuna, listen to me and do what I tell you. The opposite, Krishna tells Arjuna in the end of the Bhagavad Gita, I only share my opinion because I love you, because I care about you, because you are my friend, but ultimately do what you want. Masters send us to our individuality, to our understanding, to our contemplation, to our responsibility, to our freedom, to our authority. We're using here some topics that we learn in this book, in Prabhuji's contemplation. But Krishna still tells Arjuna, if you want to learn about the truth, it's the best to hear about it from someone who can testify. It will help you. It's favorable for your journey. And we spoke about it, that it is very logical that for a mastery of any field, guides that are familiar with the journey are very helpful. We want to follow someone who knows this journey from beginning to end, who knows both sides of the journey, who has been in the other side and who can lead us to the other side. Because he knows, he's talking about something that he knows firsthand. And similarly, in this article, now we are going back to our article, we find in this article knowledge, we find in this article intellectual contemplation, but I think the heart and the most important aspect is the testimony. And it's the fact that it is a testimony. In other words, we asked, what is devotion? The question that started this article is, what is devotion? What is bhakti? And the answer that we receive is not just knowledge, but it's a testimony. And the power of the testimony is that it can inspire us into the connection with this state from which it is derived. As we know, there are many different religions, philosophies, spiritual disciplines, yogic paths, darshanas, and different masters present to us different points of view. Main two examples that we have already touched that are significant in Hinduism and also in other religions are, for example, there is the view that sees the reality as one nature, everything is just one nature, and the path to the realization, it's meditation, for example. Another view can be that the path is of duality, of a separation between different ontological truths. There are the living entities that exist separately than the divine, and they will remain eternally separated. God exists separately, eternally, and the world exists forever as separate than the living entities and the divine. And again, this principle we can see in different religions, not just Hinduism. And the path we can hear is devotion, is love. So the relationship with the divine, we can reach to the culmination of this view. and to our existential position, we can say. We can be in our truth. And these are two examples. Similarly, there can be more examples of paths that claim to lead the practitioners to the realizations of their view. In other words, if we follow a specific path, we will get to a specific realization. For Prabhuji, I believe that there is not a particular path that he recommends. We cannot find any path that for Prabhuji is ultimate or primary or recommended. And I believe that the reason for it is that for him, the significance does not lie in the path, in any path, but in truth. Again, in the direct experience of us as individuals. If we think about it, if we accept a specific path and follow a specific path and are able to explain it, we're very well versed. We can explain it with very sophisticated arguments. We can prove its validity. We know it very well. We glorify it. But we did not tap into it directly, into the realization of the path that we claim to represent. What value does it really have in our lives? I think that Prabhuji respects the abundance, the variety of individuals, of the differences between us individuals. And similarly, Prabhuji respects the various spiritual ways to realization, which is probably why we find such a variety both in the retroprogressive contents and in Prabhuji's life's journey. For example, in this chapter, we're dealing with one window, which is devotion, one language, which is devotion, through which, as we said, Prabhuji communicates his experience and through which we can connect to our own individuality. In the second chapter, we will speak about Buddhism, a completely different language. But then yet again, Prabhuji will share his experience through that language, and yet again we can connect to our individuality through that window, through that language. So in this context, in this article, Prabhuji does not speak to us about the path of devotion, in the sense that there is a devotee and that there is God, and there are specific conditions or actions that we want to follow in order to cultivate a specific relationship and to achieve a specific spiritual state. Prabhuji speaks about devotion, the state of devotion, devotion itself, not the path of devotion. And I think this is an important distinction that I also wanted to make in regard to this article. In the previous class, we spoke about the intimate one-on-one conversation with Prabhuji that we want to find or to connect to in order to penetrate into the intentions of Prabhuji's words. Just as in regard to the religious phenomenon, if we want to tap into the intimate conversations, not just with masters, but with the divine, we need to take off the religiousness from the religions. The religiousness means the dogmas, the others, the fear, the ideas, etc. Similarly, in the listening to Prabhuji's message, we want to take off everything that separates us from the intimate conversation, because in the level of the intimate conversation, we can understand Prabhuji to the maximum. We can connect with Prabhuji, not just understand in the intellectual level. In the second class, in the chapter about religion, Prabhuji tells us, I'm not addressing readers, disciples, followers, and even peoples or nations. I am addressing you, the one who is reading these words now. If you are at all able to overcome your conditioning, it will happen within you, because you are the only one that can transcend your ego through your own powers of discrimination. if not word by word, something along these lines. This is what Prabhuji tells us. I speak to you, not to people, not to disciples, not to categories, not to mass of people, but to the individual who is listening in an individual, authentic presence, we can say, who is with me, who is listening. And similarly, in this article, we found this intimate conversation of a friend. We asked our friend, what is devotion? What is bhakti? We don't get a lecture, but we get the same communication that if we were sitting with our friend and drinking coffee, this conversation could be enabled. This mood can enable such a conversation when we really hear, what is devotion. Prabhuji tells us, but in this mood. So as always, and this is also something Prabhuji talks about in his message, if we listen to Prabhuji in this mood, I think we can penetrate into the understanding of the meaning of his words. And in this particular context, we can connect with the devotion from which he speaks and about which he speaks. So in the article that we will start to read very soon, Prabhuji tells us that not only devotion is not related to the dual plane. Typically we hear about devotion as a field that is related to the duality. Prabhuji tells us the devotion is when the duality vanishes. The devotion is about fusion, is about yoga, is when only one is. This is, I think, what we can see in Prabhuji's view in these words, in this article. He tells us the state of devotion is when the boundaries of us as person completely dissolve. This is the state of devotion. Another point that Prabhuji tells us about devotion in his attempt to help us to understand what is devotion, that it's the same love that we all know, that we all experience, the same love that we can experience between human beings, love to the country, but in its utmost purity. Also, this explanation we can find in the Bhakti Yoga book of Prabhuji when he describes different levels of love, different expressions of love. But devotion is love when it is directed to the divine, and then it's the most pure love. In the quote that Prabhuji shares here from the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna speaks to Arjuna and to all of us about the state of devotion, we see the totality of the relationship with the transcendence, because it's the only thing that we love. Krishna tells Arjuna, love me, think about me, worship me constantly, be my devotee, and then you will come to me. Then you will be in this divine consciousness, in this state of devotion, by being completely absorbed in the love to the divine. In a way, this article is opening with the culmination of devotion. We receive a description of the state of devotion, of the peak of the state of devotion, and in the next class and in the continuation of this article, we will find more preliminary stages of devotion. We will speak about them in the next class. And this article will end with another devotional testimony, not of Prabhuji, but of Lord Chaitanya, a giant devotee of Krishna, that Prabhuji chose to conclude this article with his words. Prabhuji calls these words the Shri Shikshastakam, or the 8 verses of Lord Chaitanya, one of the most beautiful devotional masterpieces. And again, this is how he concludes this article, and this is what we will visit in the 3rd class of this course. And in this testimony of Lord Chaitanya, we also find another source of inspiration for the state of devotion without a doubt. And we also find understanding regarding the attitude of an individual that is living in a state of devotion to life, to the universe. What is the attitude of a devotee? How is this love to Krishna that Krishna tells Arjuna, love me, think about me, worship me? How is it expressed in our, we can say, mental consciousness? How do we think as devotees? And I think this is what we can see in the words of Lord Chaitanya that Prabhuji will conclude the article with. So Prabhuji's words. Devotion is the purest expression of love. It is love in its absolute purity. Romance happens between people, but devotion is love for existence. In the most intimate depths, all limits that separate us from life evaporate. The boundaries that make us feel like a person separate from the whole disappear. In this divine love story, any sensation of me and mine vanishes, and we fuse with life itself. Devotion is love, not solely physical, mental, or romantic, but spiritual. It is expressed not through the body, mind, or feelings, but arises from the depths of the soul. As we experience devotion, all differences between lover and loved, subject and object, disappear. Krishna says, Man mana bhava mad bhakto, mad yaji mam namaskuru, mam evashyasi satyam te, pratijani priyoshime. Always think of me and become my devotee. Worship me and offer your homage unto me. Thus you will come to me without fail. I promise you this because you are my very dear friend. Bhagavad Gita, 1865. In a worldly romance, your heart responds to a glance, a touch, or a kiss. In devotion, your heart vibrates with the breeze that caresses the trees, the moon's reflection on a lake, or the perfume of flowers in the air. Your soul dances with the song of birds and the silence of the forest. Wherever you look, you recognize the magic, the mystery, and the divine secret. You hear it in the rustle of the wind, the sound of the waves, and the rumble of river rapids. You feel it in the fragrance of the soil after the rain, and in the salty air by the ocean. Jai Prabhuji.